Okay. Looks like you're my only fan anymore. All right. Well, I guess it's that time, so let's get her started. Got to pull up one more page here. Okay. And thank you, everybody, for joining me. Hope everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Getting on to tonight, talk about the Lieber code again. General orders number 100, and there are 100 of them, obviously. We are on 24 tonight. And with that, I am going to start sharing my screen. And I hope everybody can see that. Last week we ended on Article 23. Private citizens are no longer murdered, enslaved, or carried off to distant parts. At least they won't admit it. And the inoffensive individual is as little disturbed in his private relations as the commander of hostile troops can afford to grant in the overruling demands of a vigorous war. We are not in the midst of a vigorous war. We are in peace. And therefore, they can afford to grant as much leeway as possible in regards to those relations being private, instead of just presuming and assuming that they're all public affairs. This is the main distinction that they are not relating to in their public capacity, is that we are private peoples. So in Article 24, it says the almost universal rule in remote times was. In other words, they're saying there was a universal rule in past times and they've changed it, and now it is no longer universal, so it's just almost universal. And continues to be with barbarous armies, that the private individual of a hostile country, again, they're recognizing that there are private individuals of the hostile country, is destined to suffer every privation of liberty and protection and every disruption of family ties. Protection was and still is, with uncivilized people, the exception. They're saying that they're only going to provide you protection of their general health and welfare of the public as a civilized people. And if you don't, you are destined to suffer every privation of that liberty and protection that they use against you. This is why we have a Miranda's rights, to say Miranda warning that says you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. 25, in modern regular wars of the Europeans and their descendants, in other portions of the globe, protection of the inoffensive citizen of a hostile country is the rule. So this is why they profess the statutes and codes, and you have offended, you have committed an offense against them as a private citizen in the hostile country. Okay. Privatation and disturbance of private relations are exceptions. We come to find out that they are the norm today, because the privatation and disturbance of our private relations starts at the family, and that is what they are attacking. They are attacking the family. They are tearing families apart by every means possible. We have to realize this, and this is the importance of learning this information and how to apply it. Hosea 4 speaks. Verse 6 talks about my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And then it goes on to tell us that we are not going to be accepted in his kingdom because we don't profess that knowledge. We have shooed away from that knowledge. And by shooing away from that knowledge, we no longer profess it to our children, and therefore they're forsaken as well. He will forsake both us and our children. So we have to stand strong on those family relations. 26, commanding generals may cause the magistrates and civil officers of a hostile country to take the oath of temporary allegiance or an oath of fidelity to their own victorious government or rulers. Every public official is taking an oath of temporary allegiance or an oath of fidelity to their victorious government. And when we vote these people in as people of the country and we think our vote counts, and it doesn't, and this is proven by the very concept and implementation and use of the Electoral College, it merely means we are electing somebody. Sorry about that. I got to go back to screen share. And I believe I was babbling about when somebody gets voted in with the Electoral College. We as people are the voters, but our vote doesn't count in any aspect except that we are voting specifically for an electorate. In other words, somebody that may or may not vote for who we really want to be president or whoever we're voting for. We're voting in an electorate. And they may expel everyone who declines to do so. So in other words, when we're voting, whoever we're voting for, if they decline to take that oath of allegiance or temporary allegiance or oath of fidelity to a victorious government or rulers, then that government or rulers just expels them, says, okay, well, that vote don't count. But whether they do so or not, the people and their civil officers owe strict obedience to them as long as they hold sway over the district or country. And they do so at the peril of their lives. Okay? This is a very important aspect we have to remember in regards to the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, our right to armorial bearing. But we also have to remember the stand your ground issue too. We can't be so humble or so meek that we don't stand for ourselves. At the peril of our lives, literally means at the peril of our children's lives. And this is why it's so important to stand up. The law of war in 27, it says the law of war can no more wholly dispense with retaliation than can the law of nations. The law of war can no more wholly dispense with retaliation than can the law of nations, of which it is a branch. Okay? This is, remember when we first started studying this, I told you how the martial law, the Lieber Code itself, was written up by Frederick Lieber, and Abraham Lincoln used it according to the Civil War, and in so using it in construction of the UN, United Nations, which is what uses the law of nations and the martial law, the law of war, the law of peace. That's what all your peace treaties and everything are done through, is the United Nations. And it's telling us here that it's a branch of that. Yet civilized nations acknowledge retaliation as the sternest feature of war. A reckless enemy often leaves to his opponent no other means of securing himself against the repetition of barbarous outrage. This is why it's so important to understand and comprehend the Social Security Administration and how it operates in regards to security instruments. And we can go into that. I do, in fact, go into that in other areas, and we have discussed this in previous Zooms, and it is, in fact, a large part of correcting the status, is that we have options. And this right here says a reckless enemy often leaves to his opponent no other means of securing himself against the repetition of barbarous outrage. This is telling us that as a wise enemy that is being careful to assess its risk management through insurance programs under the martial law. It's commercial law. Insurance is all commerce or commerce is all insurance for the martial law. It's strictly to provide for the official undertaking, the actual process. The people that have to get paid somehow. So they institute a monetary exchange through a commercial system. These are known as security instruments, and they're securitized by your signature. Securing himself against the repetition of barbarous outrage. That's exactly what our forefathers did when they created the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And this is basically what we're talking about doing ourselves in the status correction, is drawing up our own paperwork to secure ourselves against this repetitious and barbarous outrage. These standing armies have no right to abuse us as people upon the land, private peoples upon the land. And they just need a notice of that. In their commercial system, it starts out with notice and knowledge. You have to give them notice. Once you give them notice, and this is why we do the debt collections the way we do. It's an administrative process. You first give them notice that you contest the debt and you're requesting validation. If they don't respond, you give them a second notice to let them know they are in default and they have an opportunity to cure that fault. The third notice comes with a notice of judgment. If they don't respond, you then have a right to go to a proper court of competent jurisdiction and issue your order for a writ of order of judgment. You can then present that as a means to collect the debt. But if they don't wish to fork over the debt, again, you go back to the administrative process and you go back to that court with your second instance for a writ of execution. So you can hand it over to the sheriff, and the sheriff goes over, knocks on the door, and says, sorry, ma'am, you must hand it over now. And this is the way it's supposed to work. And we have to realize it's a process that we have to secure ourselves. And it's simply by knowing that commercial process and how it operates through all these different venues. Like I said, these peace treaties, they have in the international forum a peace treaty. On your local forums, they actually have to operate on what is described as a commercial treaty. In commerce, they have to act in peace just as much as if they would if they were in war. They have to give certain elements to be fair and just in war and peace. Let's see here, number 28. Retaliation will therefore never be restored to as a measure of mere revenge. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, and they recognize that as well. They're telling you they are not doing this as a resort for revenge. They're strictly doing it as a source of enforcement, telling you that they are the dominant force, and we can't allow it. Can't allow something that we grant authority to then turn around and assert some kind of enforcement against us and our own will against it. But only as a means of protective retribution, and moreover, cautiously and unavoidably. That is to say, retaliation shall only be restored to after careful inquiry into the real occurrence and the character of the misdeeds that may demand retribution. This is a very important one for people to comprehend here, because it's talking about the real occurrence, the time event, and the character, the form of the misdeeds that may demand retribution. And when we have to secure ourselves against the repetition of the barbarous outrage, it's because we have to fix the occurrence or the character of the misdeeds. We have to reverse it. We have to reinforce it. We have to revenue it. We have to external revenue it. Not the internal revenue system anymore, it's the external revenue. We have to take it back out of their jurisdiction by clarifying the words and the misconveyances that have happened throughout time. The occurrences, the real occurrences, and the character of those misdeeds and how they were unlawfully conveyed. I comprehend that somebody made a statement.
He's on, right?
That I was born at a particular time and my mom gave me a name, and I was inherent a legacy of a certain family that was already in existence, and that information was abstracted and then put in form on another form, a commercial form that was then certified, becoming an instrument. And you have to be able to clarify all these different characters and misdeeds as they occurred. And again, this is why it's important to learn this stuff and know it, so that you can then demand retribution. D is as in to take away the order that they have put it in. Demand their order. Retribution, allowing you to give tribute back to the original source. You no longer have to pay tribute through their internal revenue. You revenue it externally so you can give tribute back to the one that has already given his order, his commands. Commands with order. Come with man order. Very important to understand the very roots of all the words and prefix. Okay, we're back, guys. Sorry about that. I'm glad you guys always hang in for me. Okay, let me go back to screen sharing. So we have to do this is why we do our own writings. This is why we authenticate the certificate of live birth. And we need to, in my opinion, issue a certificate of receivership with an assignment of a trustee. In other words, we give it back to the Treasury on faith and credit after it's been authenticated. And from that point on, we should be able to use them as the transfer agent for all the commercial actions or transactions of the person in commerce. By send your utility bill, send it to them, and they automatically do the discharge. You shouldn't have to be dealing with these other people once we correct things. Unjust or inconsiderate retaliation removes the belligerents farther and farther Sorry about that, folks. Unjust or inconsiderate retaliation removes the belligerents farther and farther from the mitigating rules of regular war, and by rapid steps leads them nearer to the internecine wars of savages. What that's saying there is just like Hosea 4, or verse 6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And the farther and farther we get away from that knowledge by not teaching it to our next generation so they can teach it to their next generation, the farther and farther we get away from that knowledge. And we actually are making ourselves dumber and dumber. And this is why it's so important to be involved with our brothers and sisters and quit the social distancing. We are not meant to be socially distant creatures. I agree. We don't belong in homes. We actually are supposed to be travelers, sojourners, nomads. But it comes a time where we settle down and we want a small abode that can protect us, and we can settle in an area that provides everything we need. We don't need a store. We don't need motor vehicles. Therefore, we don't need automotive shops. Therefore, we don't need gasoline pumps. Therefore, we are then able to live within our own convenient part of Mother Nature, Mother Earth, honoring our mother, just as we're told to honor our father. And this is very important when it comes to accepting life the way it is. If we're going to be involved in this stuff, we have to realize if we're trying to correct our status, it doesn't mean that we're trying to just correct our status and get away from the commercial control, but that we actually get back to our actual natural roots, people, and honoring our mother. That's one of the things that we so often forget in our trying to correct our status, is that it's not just about becoming the one that controls all our actions and everything, but realizing that our actions are actually rooted in Mother Earth. We can't take any of this material possession with us. I'm back, folks. Sorry about that. Let me get back to screen sharing here again. So when it comes down to it, we have to realize when we're trying to correct our status, it's very important to get back to the roots of everything, and that's why I talk about etymology so much. But we also have to realize, I also study what's known as epistemology, which is root knowledge, and etiology, which is root cause. And it's the most refined source that you can base your education on, and your knowledge and your experiences, so that you can really gain that true wisdom of how things actually work. Okay, so I'm going to be done with the Lieber code here in just a second, but I got to finish up with one final screen share before I cut out, because we got this last. Okay, I've got one last part here I want to read here. And by rapid steps leads them nearer to the internecine wars of savages. And this is why it's important, like I said, we need to do this stuff in peace. We need to have that knowledge so that we can enforce this stuff through our words. Again, the etymology of the words and getting back to the roots, so we can get rid of all the distractions of the prefixes and suffixes that twist the true meaning. And when we can fix that in ourselves, it truly allows us to see better the eyes of equity, because we're able to see the truth in the words themselves. Don't let other people, again, define yourself by using their words, terms, and conditions against you. Always break them down. And the only way you can do that is by knowing how they're broken down. Get yourself a concise English handbook. Learn how the prefixes and suffixes work, how the sentence structures work, and how you end up with dangling participle verbs, which means you're literally babbling. And that's basically what they're saying in their statutes and codes and regulations every time they give you a speeding ticket. It's a dangling participle verb. Don't babble to me. Your codes have to be written in a common usage, or in a language that's under common usage. And when you want to sit there and tell me that I'm commonly using dangling participle verbs, I'm going to argue that, because I know that it's written in concise English according to the proper education. And this is why it's very important to be able to know this stuff, so we can clarify it ourselves in all the different research areas and subjects. When you turn 18 and you get that high school diploma, please don't quit, please. I'm not begging you to go on to college. I'm not saying college is great. I think it's also an indoctrination system. What I am saying is educate yourself. Open your mind as far as you can. Quit letting the restrictions put you in this tunnel vision world of what you believe the world is supposed to be, based upon what somebody else believes it's supposed to be. Open your eyes and observe everything for what it actually is. And with that, I'm going to quit the screen sharing and go open the board. As far as you guys are concerned, feel free to speak your mind. That's what we're here for. Everybody's, as far as on my end, everybody's unmuted, so feel free to speak. I need your input. Are you getting anything out of these Zoom meetings? Are you learning anything? Is there anything you can teach me? Any questions are greatly appreciated, because it's oftentimes that's where I get my questions, is because I didn't think of the question you came up with. Anybody? You guys all, I'm sure, are familiar with the importance of, and I would assume it's only natural and inherent in everybody that they would know how important it is to be peaceful, because none of us wants to be harmed in any way. So we should put that as the top priority in all of our educational learning. And this is why I say, 4 years ago, when I went through that trial and I was being that belligerent and I was cussing and swearing and I was calling them all kinds of names, I might have felt good about it at the time, and I still kind of feel good about it now, but I realized my error, my mistake in doing so was that I was not as peaceful as I could have been. And in so doing, working towards that end, I could have probably and most likely better affected a outcome that I was more looking forward to, you know, as opposed to being, quote, found guilty and sentenced and convicted and all that, regardless of the fact that I know how little power it holds anymore. But it's important to realize you got to do this with intelligence and to leave the emotions behind. And the only way you can do that is by being in peace. You know, we come in disgruntled and with some kind of controversy in ourselves, and that's going to reflect in the way we act. It's going to reflect in the way we put our words on paper. And so we have to be very, very aware of that and realize that it's, in my opinion, it's one of the most important things that we need to keep on the forefront of everything we do throughout life at every instance, is to be in peace. When it comes to going before these courts and trying to rebut these debt collectors and stuff, it's important to remain in peace and just use logic and common sense. Sun Tzu says in The Art of War, to defeat one's opponent without fighting is of supreme excellence. And that, in fact, is the basis of this martial law that we're looking at now. The whole Lieber Code here that we're looking at now is basically a set of guidelines for conducting oneself in official capacity upon a foreign soil by instituting a commercial treaty, by allowing the nation's people to continue on with trade and affairs. And that's one of the things I'll speak about in later Zooms, is everybody's caught up with this tax stuff. And it's all based on import and export. You know, you gotta pay taxes on anything that you import and export from one jurisdiction to another. And today, many nationals are still stuck in that realm trying to figure out how to get out of that tax situation, because they're not being told about the third option. The third option is that as a national, we have a right to trade, make international trade deals or national trade deals with other people on the same land. And that is called an entrepot. ENTREPOT. It is much different than export and import. And that is the inherent right of the national on the land to be able to welcome sojourners from other countries and trade their wares with them, regardless of any borders. Pure and simple. And before I go, anybody else got anything to say? It's important you speak up now, because these are limited to 40-minute sessions, and I'm just about done here. Otherwise, I'm going to see if I can find it here. In the chat bar, I am posting the links to my other forums, Facebook and all that. And down at the bottom, there's a PayPal link for anybody who wishes to send me a little bit of love. I always appreciate it. But in the meantime, there's those links. And let me grab this one here real quick. This is the source material that we're reading off of. Sorry I didn't put that up in the chat bar at the beginning. Normally I do, so you can just follow along. But that's the Avalon, that's Yale education, that's Yale University. This is where they have this particular reading of the martial law, Lieber Code. So that's the source for that. So in the meantime, remember, folks, if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be doing this. God bless. Thanks for joining me tonight. Please share this video when it gets done. I'll post it on, again, there's my other forum links. Hit me up on Facebook. I'll be posting the recording there, and you can share it all from there. In the meantime, again, thanks. Love you. Have a good night. God bless.